Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amy Sam. I am the Health Education Project Specialist at the Maxwell Eleanor Blum Patient Family Learning Center at Mass General Hospital. Before we get started, just want to go over a few items with you all. Please note that today's session is being recorded for educational purposes. If you're interested in viewing the recording, you may visit the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Please note that everyone is in listen-only mode. Everyone has been muted so that we can hear our guest speaker today. If you have any questions for our guest speaker, you may enter them in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time for them in the end. Only Blum Center staff and our guest speaker will see your questions. Please do not share any personal medical information or questions in the chat box. If you have a personal medical question, please ask your doctor. So next, I would like to introduce you all to Deanna Nappi. Deanna is currently a dietetic intern at Mass General Hospital, working towards becoming a registered dietitian. Prior to becoming a dietetic intern, Deanna spent several years working in education and food access before receiving her Master of Science in Food and Nutrition Policy and Programs from Tufts University. Deanna is passionate about creating equitable and sustainable community food systems and looks forward to contributing to these systems as a registered dietitian. She joins us today to give a talk on 5 tips for a healthy start to the new year. So please join me in welcoming Deanna.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. I'm just going to go ahead and share my slides. Awesome. And so as Amy mentioned, my name is Deanna. I'm a current dietetic intern here at MGH, and I'm going to talk to you about some evidence-based tips for getting a healthy start to the new year. So Happy New Year, first of all. The new year is such an exciting time. You know, it really provides a great opportunity for reflection on the past year of our lives. And it also provides a chance to make some changes through resolutions. And I think, as we all know, often the ideas of wanting to be healthy or eat healthier or, exercise more come up in discussions around New Year's resolutions. So in the chat, I would love to hear from you all. How many of you have maybe made a resolution this year to be healthy or eat healthy? If you want to just throw it in the chat. So what does it really mean to eat healthy, and how do we do it? And more importantly, how can we actually make changes that we will stick with for the next 12 months and beyond? So those are some big questions, and that's what I'm hoping to dive into today. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to talk through what I believe are the top 5 tips for creating and sticking with some healthy habits heading into the new year. So to give you a quick preview, the 5 tips that I'm going to dive into are creating and eating balanced meals, increasing variety in protein sources, particularly with plant-based proteins, meal planning and preparation, incorporating physical activity into our daily lives, and finally, accountability and how to really stick with these diet and lifestyle changes. So first thing is balanced meals. And so what is a balanced meal? Looking at this visual here, we see all these different foods included on the plate. So we could say there's no one size fits all model for what makes a balanced meal, but there are 3 main food groups that we want to think of when we're putting together our primary meals of the day. So our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That first group is lean protein. We really want to aim to make about 1/4 of our plate a lean protein. This could be a lot of different things. It could be meat, like lean cuts of beef or skinless chicken or turkey. It could also be fish, eggs, lentils, beans, even things like nuts and nut butters or low-fat dairy could meet that lean protein. The next thing we want to think about is grains and starch. So we really want to focus another 1/4 of our plate for carbohydrates from grains, preferably whole grains, as well as starchy vegetables. So our whole grains are things like whole wheat bread or pasta, brown rice or oats. And then our starchy vegetables are things like corn, peas, and potatoes. And then lastly, we always want to aim to fill about half of our plate at every meal with a variety of fruits and non-starchy vegetables. And so since different fruits and vegetables contain different combinations of vitamins and minerals, we really want to maximize the variety of fruits and vegetables in our diet. So we want to aim to include a colorful array of fruits and vegetables throughout the day and make those different throughout all of our meals throughout the week. So just like as you could see in this visual here, it's not just one fruit or vegetable, but a large variety. And so now that we know what that balanced plate looks like, why do we want to eat balanced meals? I think it's always important to understand the why. And we want to focus on putting these balanced meals together because it benefits our bodies in so many different ways. First thing is it really ensures that we're getting all of the nutrients that our body needs to function and thrive. That protein we need for muscle growth and repair, those carbohydrates that we're getting from our grains, our fruits, and our vegetables, that's our body's main source of energy. And then fiber, which is a type of carbohydrate that we find in those whole grains, as well as those fruits and vegetables. That helps to both regulate our blood sugar and cholesterol, as well as to promote healthy digestion. And then that variety of fruits and vegetables is going to provide essential vitamins and minerals that our body needs to promote healthy functioning. And finally, healthy fat, which we'll get from things like nuts and seeds, as well as avocado or olive oil in salad dressings or cooking oil. That helps to promote satiety and satisfaction in our food. And so including combinations of all of these nutrients at each meal is really key to preserving our vascular health. So, focusing on pairing those fiber-containing carbs, so those whole grains and those fruits and vegetables, pairing them with our protein and with our healthy fat, that creates this complex combination that takes our body longer to digest. And that it's actually more nutrient dense as well. So the slower digestion, that's going to allow our body to more effectively utilize the sugars and the fat that's contained in that meal without causing any dangerous spikes in blood sugar or blood pressure or cholesterol. And another thing that slower digestion is going to help with is satiety. It means that our body is going to feel full and satisfied for longer periods of time, which will decrease that temptation to reach for, some maybe not so healthy snacks in between meals when we're getting a little bit hangry. And so on the right of this slide, I just included a few examples of how we could use this balanced plate approach to put some meals together. So for breakfast, that might look like, a whole grain of oatmeal with a lean protein of peanut butter, and then some apple slices as a fruit. It could also be, for a lunch or dinner, maybe having some salmon with brown rice and roasted broccoli. Or another lunch of, a hummus wrap or a hummus sandwich on whole wheat bread with some cucumbers and tomatoes. So a lot of different options, just combining those three food groups. And so while I started touching on the importance of fruits and vegetables already, I want to dive even deeper into the benefits of reducing our intake of animal-based proteins while increasing our plant consumption. So once again, I'd love to hear from you all in the chat and see if anyone here already follows a primarily plant-based diet. So something like vegetarian or vegan. All right. Awesome. Great. So it looks like some people are have thought about it or are interested in potentially trying it. And so growing research that maybe you all have heard of in the past few years has really pointed out how much food impacts the overall health of our environment. And food production in general is a primary component of greenhouse gas emissions. However, when we really start to piece apart food production, we see that animal-based food production in particular contributes the most to CO2. And this is due to the resource-intensive practices around both feeding and raising animals, as well as processing and distributing meat and animal-based products. So studies have been done to actually compare different diets and how much greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to each type of diet. And what we see here in the data from one of those studies is that even decreasing the amount of meat that we're eating to once a day or maybe a couple times a week can result in significant reductions in emissions. So I just want to use this slide to emphasize that in order to make a healthy change in terms of your protein consumption, it's not about going all the way to being a vegetarian or being a vegan from if you're already eating a fair amount of meat, but really just reducing the amount of meat that we're eating, again, to maybe once a day or a couple times a week. And then beyond planetary and environmental health, eating less meat can also reduce our risk for developing diet-related chronic diseases. So as we could see here, as of 2020, 5 of the top 10 leading causes of death in the US are related to diet. And through discussing our balanced meals, we already touched on the fact that eating lean protein and plenty of fruits and vegetables can help to improve our health. And then taking that one step farther, plant-based proteins in particular are going to decrease saturated fat intake and increase fiber intake, which are both major factors in decreasing overall risk for these chronic diseases. So another reason that it's particularly important to both decrease our animal-based proteins while increasing the amount of plants we're eating. And so again, we know the why that we should eat less meat and eat more plant-based proteins. But if we're already eating meat once, twice, maybe more than that a day, how can we realistically start limiting that in our diet? And my main advice here is to take it slow and do what seems manageable for you. So, if you're already eating meat daily, you could start by eating meat just once a week, try to go for meatless Mondays. Or you could try, if you're eating meat multiple times a day, try narrowing it down to just once a day. So you could go meatless before dinner. You could also come up with some creative swaps for your favorite meat-based dinners. So, maybe if you like to make beef tacos, you could try using a soy chorizo one night. I'm a big fan of the soy chorizo at Trader Joe's. Or you could try doing fish tacos. Another option, if you really like having spaghetti and meatballs, you could maybe try a chickpea pasta one night. Try to just switch it up. And then I would also recommend preparing your own food. And when you are, sticking with that balanced plate approach. Through being intentional about choosing a lean protein, plant-based when possible, as well as that whole grain and filling your plate with vegetables, you're inevitably going to eat smaller portions of meat when you do choose them. And if you plan ahead, you can make sure that you are having those plant-based proteins at least a few times a week. And the last thing I'll say here is to just be cautious when it comes to meats. So things like Beyond or Impossible burgers. In theory, they're great because you're eating less meat, but some of them actually contain saturated fat levels that are close to that of actual animal meats. So I would just say, if you are interested in trying some of those fake meats, just take a peek at the nutrition label and try to choose options that have less than 2 grams of saturated fat per serving. All right, and then that leads perfectly into my next tip, which is planning meals ahead. And so why do we want to plan meals ahead of time? As we touched on with eating less meat, preparing our own food and planning our balanced meals in advance has been shown to increase intake of fruits and vegetables and improve overall diet quality. And it does that because you can ensure that you have a variety of fruits and vegetables and lean and plant-based proteins and even whole grains on hand when you want to cook. You could also choose recipes in advance that you can ensure will meet all of those balanced plate needs. Not to mention, meal planning also saves you time and money. When you take the time to pick out recipes, make a grocery list in advance, you're saving yourself time having to run to the store multiple times during the week for forgotten ingredients. You could also plan to make food in large batches ahead of time that you could freeze or use for lunches throughout the week. And that prevents, having to take yourself out for lunch or buy the family takeout when you realize that you don't have any time to cook dinner that night. And I think we could all agree, though, that meal planning is much easier said than done, especially when we all have crazy busy schedules, which we do. So realistically, how can we go about planning meals ahead of time? And I think some things we already know, making time over the weekend to do a big grocery shop and to cook in large quantities to have throughout the week. It's going to be super helpful. Also, choosing recipes based on ingredients that you maybe already have available in the pantry so that you're not spending extra money on ingredients at the store. But how can we make those things easier? My main advice here is to use an app. There are actually a lot of great and free meal planning apps available. So some options are Paprika, PlateJoy, Prepare, Big Oven, and Meal Board. And actually the one that I have pictured here is Paprika. But if you just go onto the App Store and search meal planning, a bunch of options will come up and you could kind of do some investigating and find one that works best for your needs. And they're really awesome. On most of these apps, you could search for and save recipes that you like. And from those recipes, you could create grocery lists and make meal plans for the week or further out. And some even have features that actually help you organize your pantry. So when you're at the store with your phone, you could check to see if you already have any ingredients at home. And so by having these features on your app, on your phone, you could even work through finding recipes, creating grocery lists and meal planning throughout the week when you're scrolling on your phone on the train or maybe between meetings at work. So that can reduce some of the stress of, having to dedicate your whole Sunday to needing to meal plan for the week. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about physical activity. We all know that exercise is important, right? But again, why do we need to exercise? Why do we really need to be physically active? And again, evidence has shown that regular physical activity has incredibly significant health implications, particularly these ones that I've included here. So reduced risk of chronic disease and all-cause mortality, improved functional capacity and improved brain cognition, as well as increased bone health, even lowered risk for anxiety and depression, and improved sleep and quality of life. So super important. And when I say regular physical activity, what do I mean by that? And according to the physical activity guidelines for Americans, to reap those benefits that I just went over through regular physical activity, we should be aiming for about 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week. So that's about 30 minutes, 5 days a week of activities that make our heartbeat faster and that force us to breathe a little bit harder. And in addition to that, we want to aim for 2 days a week of muscle strengthening. So those are activities that push our muscles to work harder and maybe leave us with a little bit of sore muscles. And so while we think about things like running or biking or going to the gym as the things that would fulfill these guidelines, there's actually so many different types of activities that you could be doing and some that you're maybe already doing that we could build off of. So aerobic activity, it could be things like running or biking, but it could also be dancing or taking your dog for a walk, or even going for a hike. And then muscle strengthening activity could be things like weightlifting at the gym. But that could also include, some push-ups at home. It can include gardening. It could even include walking up the stairs or walking up a hill in your neighborhood. So the most important thing here is to find activities that you can enjoy and activities that you can easily fit into your current lifestyle. And I want to kind of dive a little bit more deeper into how we could fit these activities into our lifestyle. Because again, our day-to-day lives are busy and 150 minutes of extra activity seems like a lot. And just like with diet changes, the key is to start small, make achievable goals, and when possible, find something fun that you can enjoy and look forward to doing with that time. And so a couple more tips here. Some days are busier than others. And if that means you could only dedicate 5 or 10 minutes to taking the dog for a walk or dancing around the apartment while you're cooking dinner, that's okay. Take that 5 or 10 minutes because that still counts towards that 150 minutes per week. I fall into this trap often myself where it's like, if I can't dedicate a full 20 to 30 minutes for a full workout, I convince myself that it's not worth it. I'm just not going to do anything today. Whereas in reality, that 5 or 10 minutes really does help add up throughout the week. You could also use a fitness tracker to help motivate yourself if that works for you. So something like a Fitbit or even the health app on your phone. You could set goals on there, maybe how many steps you want to get during the week. And you could even set yourself reminders to help you get up and get in those steps or get moving. So something that I like to do on my watch is I set it to alert me if I haven't gotten up from my desk or if I haven't moved at all in 30 minutes. So it'll send me a little alert and I know that after 30 minutes, I should get up. And even if it's just taking a little walk around my office, walking up and down a flight of stairs, I know that I should take that time to just move around. And as I mentioned, it's really important to find the activities that you enjoy and make time for them. So whether that's gardening, whether it's walking the dog, jogging with friends, doing yoga, find something that you enjoy and build that into your schedule. There's a ton of research out there that shows that enjoyment is really key to long-term sustainability. And if you're trying to fit something into your schedule that you are dreading every time you think about having to do it, like lifting weights or going for a run potentially, then it's not going to work out for you. And lastly, I want to encourage you to look for ways that you can increase your activity level throughout your normal day-to-day tasks. So things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator at work. And if you maybe work on the 14th floor of a building, take the elevator to the 12th floor and walk the last 2 staircases. Something else you could do is park your car at the far end of a parking lot so that you need to take an extra couple of minutes to just walk into the grocery store. Just a couple other ways that you could take those 5 minutes here and there to really take advantage of that opportunity to move. And then the last thing I want to talk about is accountability. We've gone over all of these changes that we could potentially make going into the new year, but how can we actually ensure that they stick? And I just want to start this slide by acknowledging that creating new behaviors is really hard. But there are some strategies that have been proven to be successful for making these changes sustainable, for making them stick. And the first is that we want to build these changes into habits. And the way we do that is preparing ourselves to put in the hard work early to build these changes into habits. If your goal is to walk for 30 minutes before work a few days a week, mentally prepare yourself to push through the discomfort of waking up early on those days for the first couple of weeks. Because especially when it's cold and dark outside, it's going to be challenging. But soon enough, that new wake up time, the walk in the morning, it's just going to be part of your new schedule. It's going to be part of your usual habits that you go through every day. So you just have to kind of push through that initial discomfort and make that change into a habit. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to seek out social support. It's no surprise to have someone else checking in on you helps to keep your motivation up, no matter what change you're trying to make, whether it's exercise, diet changes, and that social support could look different for everyone, and you should really find what works for you. So that might be starting a Facebook group to share recipes and talk about meal planning, or it could be, choosing to walk around the neighborhood a few days a week with your partner or a friend or family member. Something else it could be is, dedicating one night a week where you and your kids, choose a meal and cook together. Just some way to keep yourself accountable to other people. It's also really helpful to build in healthy triggers to remind yourself to do and stick with these changes. So what I mean by healthy triggers is little visuals that will remind and cue yourself to do a certain behavior. So this could be maybe setting phone reminders or alerts in your phone to plan meals for the week. So maybe you get an alert on Sunday morning, reminding you to go grocery shopping and plan meals. Or it could be an alert at 4:30 every day, reminding you to go for a 15-minute walk. Just something popping up in your mind to kind of cue you to do that behavior. It could also be something like, picking out your clothes to go for a walk or for a jog in the morning the night before and setting them aside, or leaving your exercise shoes by the door in the morning, reminding you to go for that walk before you leave. And lastly, and what I think is most important, I want to end with having self-compassion. I said it before and I'll say it again, making changes is really hard. And while not every meal that you make is going to be perfectly balanced, and not every week are you going to be able to fit in that 150 minutes of exercise, just keep in mind that every bit counts, and that over time, all of these small changes are going to manifest in large benefits on your health, like we talked about today. And so I also, on that note, just want to mention that if you are interested in working more in depth in one-on-one with a professional around dietary changes and goal setting, you can always work with a registered dietitian. And that's something that if you are interested in that, your PCP can make a referral for you. And then pull all of this together, I want to just take a look at all of the 5 tips here in one slide and just go over them. To make some healthy, evidence-based, sustainable changes, I really encourage you to focus on making most of your meals balanced, and just remembering that balanced plate. Focus on pairing that lean protein with a whole grain and a variety of fruits and vegetables. And as often as you can, make those lean proteins plant-based. And starting from where you are with your meat consumption. If you eat meat every day, start by, aiming for one meatless day a week. Um, and then save time and money while improving your diet by planning your meals ahead of time. Take time to do that, and remember to check out those apps if that's something that could work for you. Um, and then incorporate physical activity into your daily life. Remember, find activities that you enjoy, and that you could easily fit into your lifestyle. And also build off of activities that you're already doing. And finally, keep yourself accountable. Create those healthy triggers for yourself and seek out social support. And lastly, and most importantly, again, be kind to yourself, because change isn't easy. And so just keep working at those balanced meals, even if occasionally, they aren't, and that's okay. And so now I just want to take a peek at the chat to see if there are any questions. The rest of the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Deanna, for a wonderful presentation. We are now at the end of the session, so if you have any questions for Deanna, feel free to enter them in the chat box. So we have a question for someone with egg and nut allergies. What are some lean protein rich plant-based food and snack suggestions?
Yeah, great question. And so I'm actually just gonna go back to my balanced plate visual, because I think that would be helpful. There are a lot of opportunities to get lean protein into our diet. Give me 1 minute as I scroll. Here we are. So if you can't have nuts or eggs, some other things you might want to consider are low-fat dairy. Potentially a yogurt is a great snack option. Some other things could be, if you're looking at meals, you could do, lentils or beans as a plant-based protein. Another one that I really love is hummus. So a great snack that I have all the time is hummus with maybe some vegetables like carrots or cucumbers. So those are some things that I would go to, but definitely a lot of options out there, even if you have allergies.
And we know there's hidden sodium in everything we eat. What are some alternatives to seasoning our food that's not high in salt?
For seasoning food?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love using different spices. So any spices or herbs that you come across, those don't have any added sodium. So when you can, I would recommend using fresh herbs, but also, any other spices that you have available. You could use those instead of salt. And what I will say with salt and sodium is that it takes a couple of weeks for our taste palates to change. But if you start taking salt out, or taking salt off the table, or removing salt when you're cooking, again, it might take a couple of weeks, but your taste palate will change to not crave that salt quite as much. If you do like using sauces and things like that, there are a lot of low sodium options out there as well. So I would just, take a peek at the label and look for things that are labeled low sodium, or in general, looking for things that have, about less than 300 milligrams of sodium per serving is what I'd recommend.
Thank you. For people who don't have access to smartphone apps, what are some online resources for meal planning do you recommend?
Yeah, great idea or great question. One of my favorite resources personally is a website called Budget Bites. And it's just budgetbytes.com. And on that website, you could search for a bunch of recipes, and they also have the option for you to look up meal plans. So it will kind of help you generate meal plans for the week. And through that, you could kind of search and create your meal plans based on different nutrition requirements, as well as based on how much that recipe generally costs. So if you're trying to cook on a budget, that will help you think of recipes that are a little less expensive. But that's one of my favorite resources.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also I do want to add that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they also have a lot of recipes and tip sheets for meal planning or planning grocery lists as well. So that's something that you could look up for resources.
Is that through eatright.org?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
So I will share those links in the
Perfect.
chat for anyone interested. So we have a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. While we give folks a minute before we end today's session, Deanna, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, here is a lot of information that I threw at you, but I think the main thing that I just want to is that, small changes over the long term will lead to, really big overall benefits on your health. So I think it's really easy to get caught up in, diving into a diet, making a lot of changes that overall aren't sustainable, that are really hard to stick with. So my advice again is to just make small changes here and there that you really can stick with over a long period of time, especially like with exercise, finding activities that you enjoy and that you want to include in your schedule, or finding plant-based proteins that you really like and look forward to eating. It's changes like that that are really going to benefit you in the long term.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Deanna.
Of course.
So I don't see any additional questions in the chat. I think, it's safe to end early today. As mentioned earlier on in today's session, this session is being recorded. So if you're interested in viewing the recording, you may visit the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Thank you, Deanna, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found today's session helpful, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me.